NAB 2022 has just closed. It's Rob, Andrew and Sam here from Caretta Research. We've been in Las Vegas for 6 days. We've had more than 60 meetings. We think we've walked more than 200 kilometers according to the step count. And we're going to share some of the things that we've learned along the way. We're sitting here in the brand new West Hall at the Las Vegas Convention Center. So we've all enjoyed using the Tesla Hyperloop, or is it a car in a drain? It depends who you ask, to get between the halls. It's certainly good for the exercise, and it works off all of the Las Vegas food. I guess the first question everyone was worried about before NAB this year is, would anyone turn up? Did anyone turn up?
I think universally the show matched or exceeded people's expectations. The people who didn't have a booth wish they had a booth. The people who had a small booth wish they had a bigger booth. And ultimately, although it wasn't as crowded as we're used to, I think the quality of buyer was there. There were less browsers, more buyers, and the people that were here were ready to spend.
I think everyone I spoke to found that the footfall was a lot more than they were expecting. I just spoke to one vendor actually just as the show closed. They were looking at the badge scans for their lead count, and they said they had about half the number of scans, but more companies. So basically that tells us that individual buyers were sending fewer people to the show. The overall number of companies represented here was about the same.
I think there was a general optimism from the industry to have the first trade show in 3 years, and it was great to meet everybody in person and finally see people face to face, not over video call for the first time.
So in terms of some of the technology trends that we've noticed, I think one thing that really stood out to me is quite a few of the vendors in our industry want to be the platform in future. Quite a lot of people coming forward saying, yeah, we now want to be a platform or even an operating system. What does that actually mean?
I think it means different things from different vendors. There was an impression that some of these platforms were APIs that already existed. They're just bringing them into the forefront of their marketing and giving them a nice name.
Do the buyers want to have these platforms? Is this solving a buyer problem, or is it solving a vendor problem?
I think it's in response to buyers that require modularization of the solution. I think this is telling them you can swap out different parts, and a real platform with real open and flexible APIs should address that problem. Now, the question is, how open are these platforms?
But can there be one platform for the whole industry, which is what some of the vendors are hoping their product will be?
Well, that's for the buyers to decide, but no, there can't really, not practically. There was an impression that the platforms that they were launching were really meant for pre-existing vendor partnerships where they already had an established relationship. How open they'll be to allow competition or other vendors or even in-house initiatives from the buyers themselves to develop on their platforms yet to be seen.
One of the other trends that we were looking at in the run-up to NAB was, again, linked to the sort of transition to these SaaS-like selling models. And we kind of identified the fact that more and more technology vendors are moving to a kind of consumer-like way of selling their products. And I think we definitely saw that here at NAB 2022. And I think what stood out to me is several people that we spoke to launching freemium models, so giving away at least a certain level of access to their product for free. That's quite transformational, isn't it?
I think it's a natural evolution of the self-service SaaS multi-tenancy migration, and because the cost of spinning up a service is so cheap, you can afford to launch it as a loss leader, and this is why we get these freemium models. We've seen it work in consumer products and SaaS, and we're seeing vendors here experiment that in the enterprise, in the B2B side.
So some of the examples of the freemium model that we saw at the show this year were Grass Valley's freemium playout, Pebbles, entry-level IP orchestration, and Planetcast's freemium disaster recovery services.
So one of the trends that I've noticed is the rise of streaming. Of course, we've seen that the consumption is shifting to streaming, and it seems that many of the technology vendors at NAB are responding. We've just seen so many products adding on some sort of publication or direct-to-consumer or streaming capability. It seems that everybody wants to become a fully fledged online video platform now in what's already a really competitive space. Sam, you've been seeing a lot of vendors in that area. What are you seeing?
Well, it seems like vendors that are traditionally kept to one area of the market, like security or DRM, and on the front end players that are involved in things like UX, they've decided to really flesh out their technology stacks and add in modular components to offer an OVP. The emphasis being on modularity this year as opposed to the kind of end-to-end solutions that we've seen traditionally before.
Yeah, it certainly looks like OVP and streaming is becoming quite saturated, and I think for all of these players to be successful, the promise of the non-traditional media entertainment customer, be that corporate, enterprise, house of worship, if that pot of gold exists at the end of the enterprise rainbow, is yet to be seen.
One topic that really stands out at NAB this year is how we're still having this discussion about cloud, and over perhaps in the north and central halls over there, where there's perhaps some more traditional vendors can be found, there's still discussions going on about whether cloud adoption is right. You're still seeing products that are basically a PC stuck into a rack mount and sold as a solution. Over here in the West Hall, it's all the SaaS native vendors. Everything's in the cloud. They wouldn't dream of selling a hardware product to do that. It seems that the industry is almost a little bit confused between whether cloud is the right approach or not.
I think it is a bit confused. I think their vendors are still trying to demarcate their messaging and marketing between what's on-prem and cloud. Really, it's a moot point for buyers.
Yeah, it seems like the main takeaway from buyers is that the technology they're buying, the value is in the problem that it solves rather than necessarily the deployment method.
And I think what we have seen is that there really is a strong desire from many buyers to have access to much more flexible technology, however it's deployed, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud or hybrid. So the SaaS way of selling, the flexibility that comes from that is important, I think, regardless of what the product looks like. And I guess we'll leave you with one final thought, which is we figured out, walking around the halls of NAB, which is the number one media technology product in the world. Do you know what it is?
Tell us, Rob.
It's the Chrome web browser, because that's literally found on every vendor's booth at NAB, running pretty much every product that's out there, at least the software products. And I think it's fair to say that if your product is not a browser-based solution and is still running in some sort of thick client, then probably you've got a little bit of development work to be doing after NAB and before IBC into September this year.
Poor Microsoft Edge.